This here is not the Audiofuse Studio. This is actually the original Audiofuse, and I bought it when it was released, and I have been using it for a couple of years now. It's been my main audio interface, using it pretty much daily, and been very happy with it. And here's the Audiofuse Studio, the bigger brother to the Audiofuse. It's not a replacement, it's just more feature packed, it's larger, and we're of course gonna take a long, hard look at all the features in today's video. This is an 8-channel interface, but it's also expandable up to 18 input, 20 output using ADAT, so that's an additional 8 inputs, and SPDIF, which is an additional 2 inputs. And compared to the original Audiofuse, it has 2 inputs here, 2 inputs here, so it's a 4-input interface. You have 8 additional channels over ADAT and 2 over SPDIF as well. Notable on the Audiofuse Studio is that it has 4 mic inputs, XLR connectors, and it has Arturia's discrete Pro preamps, which are also on the Audiofuse, the original one, as well as the 8 Pre that I've reviewed before. If you haven't seen my videos on the Audiofuse and the 8 Pre, I'll link them down in the description for you. We'll talk some more about the audio quality later, but let's just say that these are very low noise and high gain preamps. So they have from 2.5 to 76 dBs of gain, which is a lot. Now these 4 channels can be instrument, they can be line, they can be mic, and then we have 4 additional line inputs on the back that you can also switch to RCA, so one of the pairs can become RCA for using with a turntable, for example. So in terms of controls, we have phantom power switch here individually for each channel. You can switch it to instrument if you want to, so if you want to record, say, an electric guitar in here. We have a pad, which can either work to dampen the signal, or you can also hold it down to get a 10 dB signal boost. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And we also have phase inversion here with a little button press. Now there's a new nifty function here, which is called listen. So if you press it, you'll mute all the other audio and just listen to the inputs. But I also want to note that a really favorite feature of mine from the original Audiofuse is no longer here. So the original Audiofuse has this nice little rotary wheel here that lets you set what you're monitoring. So if you're monitoring the direct inputs or the computer feed or a balance between. So you don't have something like that on the Audiofuse Studio. And all the buttons and knobs here feel very well made, like on the original Audiofuse, high quality stuff. And in terms of audio specs, you have 44.1 kHz up to 192 kHz. And if you're using ADAT, it goes down to 96 kHz as the max sample rate. And just like with the original Audiofuse, the Studio and the 8 Pre doesn't have any onboard DSP, so if you're looking for that, this is not the audio interface for you. Good to know is also that you have dedicated loopback channels for recording system audio. And if we take a look here, you can see that we have 2 headphones amplifiers, just like on the original Audiofuse. And as on the original Audiofuse, you also have 2 different sockets for each of the amplifiers, so a big one and a small one. I always try and avoid saying it in English because I never quite get it right when I try and say the measurements. But it's the big jack and the small jack. And you can actually run all 4 at the same time, but you only have 2 controls. Another nifty feature is that you can set the headphones to mono, so independently you can have a mono mix in one pair of headphones if you want to. There's also a talkback microphone built into the Audiofuse itself. And here's the master volume knob, and also a dim switch, a mute switch, and a mono switch. So you can monitor in mono, and we'll talk more about the monitor section later in the video because it's one of the highlights, for me at least. There's also LEDs up here indicating the clock source, the USB connection, and a switch for Bluetooth on and off. More about that later. There's a lot of things coming later. And when it comes to connecting it to the computer, it's actually a USB Type-C connection, but it's using a USB 2.0 protocol. So it's a USB 2 interface, works with any computer that works with USB 2, and it's also compatible with most smartphones and tablets. And it comes with this nice braided cable USB-C to C, and also a USB-C to, I think it's called Type A, the normal one. I had to go and check the box here just to make sure, but yes. Yeah, comes with one of these here, the normal ones. And speaking about MIDI, you get these breakout cables that attach back here. Now the interface can be powered over USB without using the power brick, but this is not ideal and not really recommended because a lot of the features are switched off. This is definitely not meant to be a portable interface. If you want a portable interface, I would recommend the Audiofuse. It might not look it, but it's actually very portable. Like it's not very big, especially if you compare it. And it actually has a ton of features and not a lot of things that you'll easily break off. And I know some people that travel with it. The first and most important feature of this audio interface is of course the audio quality. So let's start with a little bit of a mic preamp test, and I'll also compare the Audiofuse Studio to two other interfaces, the Audient Evo 4 that I recently reviewed and the Claret 8 Pre. And one thing I want you to sort of look for is how much gain you can get out of each of the interfaces. Alright, here's a little microphone preamp test using the Audiofuse Studio and the Rode Procaster mic that I've used for many of my sound card or audio interface reviews. Now, this is a mic that requires quite a bit of gain. You know, you need to have a pretty good preamp. I have the gain set to about quarter past at the moment. And if you haven't checked out my friend Podcastage video on the 8 Pre, another audio interface from Arturia, you really should.
These discrete Pro Pre's are absolutely insane, perfectly capable of driving the SM7B cleanly.
In that video he uses the SM7B. I don't have one here to test with, but since the preamps are basically the same and he's getting a really good result with SM7B, I think it's fair to say that the preamps hold up very well. So that was the Audiofuse Studio. Now let's listen to the Evo 4 from Audient. And what you're hearing now is the totally 100% clean sound from the mic into the Evo 4 interface. No effects, no EQ, no nothing. And here's the Claret 8 Pre from Focusrite. So here's a microphone preamp test with the Claret 8 Pre. And we have the same conditions, a noisy room, a computer in the background. We even have a little fan here on my light that you might be able to pick up. And if I hold down the pad button, I get a 10 dB boost. So let's listen to that as well. Alright, and here's with the signal boosted, and you should be able to pick out some birds in the background that are chirping away. So just hold down the pad button to get some extra gain out of your preamp. Now I think that all three interfaces sound good, but I think that the Audiofuse and the Claret have more clarity to the sound. It sounds just a little bit more, alive compared to the Evo 4. But then there's a very big price difference between these interfaces as well. So that's something to keep in mind. And if Arturia was to make like a smaller version, like a really small version, like some budget version, but with the same discrete Pro preamps, now that would, possibly kill some of the competition, I think. Now another really cool feature is something we have on the back, which is the USB hub. So it's a 3-port USB hub. 2 of the ports are high powered, one of them is more meant for, say, dongles or USB drives. So I have successfully hooked up the Complete Control keyboard and the Machine MK3, and both have been working flawlessly, making the Audiofuse yet again a really good option for anybody wanting just one unit here to tie everything together. Next up is one of my favorite features of the Audiofuse Studio and the original Audiofuse, and that is that you can use it as a monitor controller. So you can have up to 2 pairs of speakers connected to it, and you can switch between them seamlessly. You have easy access to volume control, and this control is also independent, so you can have different volume settings per speaker. Another small thing is that the Audiofuse Studio can be used independently of a computer, so you could basically use it as a mixer. Basically, you can save settings on it. So whatever settings you have set up in the software, if you unplug it, those settings are saved on the unit. So you can use it without a computer if that's something you need or want. Now this audio interface also have 2 aux outputs, and these are flexible. You can use them to reamp something, basically taking the signal of a guitar. I don't have a guitar to show you. I don't play guitar. You can take the signal of, say, an electric guitar, and then you can reamp it. So basically have one signal go into the Audiofuse, record it, and have the signal go out of the Audiofuse into an amp, mic it up, record it onto another channel. The two aux outputs are also DC coupled, which means that you can use it to control your Euro rack. Or you could just use the aux as sort of a sending it to, say, the analog heat, and just having a little bit of flexibility which channels you want to route to it. The Audiofuse Studio also comes with some nice plugins. Now another feature I talked about is the Bluetooth. So I press the Bluetooth here to enable it, and the Audiofuse should show up. Now I can see this being super useful for people who have a lot of guests in the studio. You just want to play something from your phone. Maybe you don't want to have the hassle of, sending the files back and forth. And for me personally, there's plenty of times where I get sent something on my phone and I just want to quickly listen to it on my computer. Maybe I get it sent on Instagram. I want to listen to it on my good pair of speakers or something, and I don't want to have the hassle of sending files back and forth. So for some people this will actually be very, very useful. For others it's more of a kind of a novel, fun thing. Now a question that I think some of you will have is, how hot does it get? Because the original Audiofuse actually ran pretty hot. The design is such that there's not that much ventilation, and instead the entire chassis is like a heat sink. And it did get uncomfortably hot sometimes. So how's the studio? Well, the design is slightly different. As you can see, it's just not one solid block, and there's plenty of ventilation all around the unit. And I've been using it quite a lot these last few weeks. I've had it on for entire days, running projects and stuff. It doesn't really get hot. Nothing close to the original Audiofuse anyway. The weak point of the original Audiofuse was the micro USB. I don't know how many times I've pulled this and it disconnected. Boom! Get these big pops from my speakers, and it's quite annoying. So I was really happy to see a USB Type-C connection on the Audiofuse Studio. It's actually quite a big deal for me. Love the interface, don't love the connection. But what's also quite important is that they're no longer using a proprietary, is that how you say it? Proprietary. Well, they had a very special cable. So if it broke, you probably had to get one from Arturia. I don't really think that they're selling these cables somewhere else. So that's another reason why it's great that they moved over to USB Type-C. The Audiofuse Studio also have 4 inserts. So for channels 1, 2, 3, and 4, you have 1 insert per channel. This means that you can, for example, have a microphone on channel number 1. You can then hook up, say, a compressor onto the insert number 1, and that way you're sending the signal from the mic to the compressor back into the Audiofuse again. So insert points is actually one of the unique features of this audio interface, because it's really something you find mostly on mixers. So for some of you who want to keep your setup very tight, where you might not want a patch bay or an additional mixer, this can actually be quite handy if you're using external processors like compressors, EQs, or something similar. Now we've come to the end of the video, and I want to give you my honest thoughts, like some pros, some cons, some final thoughts on these audio interfaces. First off, I've been using the original Audiofuse for a long time, and it's held up beautifully. Basically, it's only the micro USB connection that has been a gripe for me. That's the one thing. The software, of course, isn't super complex. You can do basic routings. There's a lot of other audio interfaces that offer more routing possibilities and a more complex software, but it works very well and it does what it's supposed to do. Now, I think that the main selling point of these audio interfaces is that they're so feature-packed. There's so many novel and unique aspects to them. There's not really that much to compete in terms of functionality. However, you do need to consider whether or not you want that functionality. So if, for example, inserts and the aux isn't something for you, the Bluetooth, you don't see any use for it, you don't need it as a monitor controller, well, then probably this isn't for you, I suppose. But the more I'm using the Studio, the more I'm loving it because of its, features, because it's so feature-packed. If you want DSP, this is not for you. There are better options out there. And I also want to note that the latency performance, while it's good, it's not great, especially if you're comparing it to a Thunderbolt interface. These are USB 2.0 interfaces. They work with virtually any computer, smartphone, tablet, so that's a really big, strong selling point. But being USB 2.0 interfaces, they're not the quickest of the bunch. So if you want something with like lightning speeds, I guess something with Thunderbolt comes in handy. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And my camera died while I was recording, but yeah, should you get this audio interface? Well, do you need the feature set? Do you need 4 great mic preamps? You need, all this mic boost that you can get out of it, all the features. So like, if you don't need the features, it's not worth getting anything, like you have to need it. But all in all, solidly built, well made. I think that Arturia is really showing that they're taking their audio interface lineup, very seriously. Had this for years, paid for it myself, and I've been loving it. So definitely I recommend this series of audio interfaces if it's what you need. So hopefully you found out with my videos help, and if not, there's great resources. I'll link a few videos down in the description, some other reviews, podcasted video as well. And of course, thank you so much for being here in these troubling times. I'm very grateful that you come to my channel and watch my videos. So thank you so much, and hope to see you in another video.